Welcome to Parshat Shmini, but Shabbat Hachodesh. So this is the fourth and final of the special Maftir and Haftarah combinations between Purim, surrounding Purim and Pesach, right? So Shkalim and Zachor were pre-Purim, leading up to Purim, and then last week we looked at it's escaping me, the Shabbat that it was last week was a special one, but it will come back to someone here. And this week we're looking at the final one, which is Shabbat HaChodesh. And as with all the other special maftir and haftarah, the haftarah speaks about the maftir. And both of them, the primary focus is the Korban Pesach. Right, so we're clearly pivoting towards the Korban Pesach here. But it is also about the new moon, right? This, if it wasn't special as Shabbat HaChodesh, it would have been special anyway because we read a special Haftarah before Rosh Chodesh, and Rosh Chodesh will be next week, right? And so it touches on both of these mitzvot of counting the first new moon, which is Nisan, and also the Korban Pesach. And we're not going to look at the Korban Pesach inside, but just to say a word about it, the maftir is really focused on the contemporary experience in the Torah, meaning that it's about the Korban that the people who are leaving Egypt offer when they are leaving. It's not really applicable or relevant to us today, right? Because it's about putting blood on the doorposts and about preparing to flee Egypt. And in the Haftarah, which is from Yechezkel, it's about a messianic age, right? Yechezkel is prophesizing towards a third temple period. And in fact, there could have been a fascinating shir, maybe another Parshat HaChodesh, about the differences between Yechezkel's envisioned korbanot and the korbanot that are described in Vayikra for this special occasion. So it seems like in Messianic times, there's a different set of rules altogether. And so it does leave a gap for what I would call like future generations, right? We have the generation of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and we have the projected Messianic times Korban, and there's not a lot in between. So which is why ultimately I felt like that was not the path I wanted to go down. So what I want to do, what I hope to do, is that we can look at the connection to the maftir about the new moon, and then we can look at one specific piece of the Haftarah that I thought was very beautiful, because I think, right, this is not about an actual preparation for Pesach, right? Amalek and Zachor is maybe about some actual preparation at some point, but it seems clear that here, this is about like an emotional preparation. So I want to look at one piece that I think will help us perhaps emotionally prepare for the Regel, for Pesach. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see if I can do it. Oh, you'll see all my tabs today. That's okay. I'm a tab heavy person. So as I said, one of the focuses, this is from Shmot, from the Maftir, HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim rishon hu lachem l'chadshei hashana, right? That this month of Nisan shall mark for you the beginning of the months. It's the new year. And I brought this Mishnah from Rosh Hashanah, which just reminds us that there are 4 different New Years. And the one that we are looking at here is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, is the New Year for Kings. Rosh Hashanah l'melachim v'leregalim. And also it's the way that we count the order of the regels, right? So we start with Pesach, then Shavuot, then Sukkot. Even though to like our secular sort of modern sensibility, we might think of Sukkot as the first one in the fall, right? Followed by Pesach and Shavuot. The way that we count within the Torah is Pesach is the first of the regalim. And in Yechezkel, the reason that we call this Shabbat HaChodesh, right, is because of the maftir, but we can see it echoed here as well. Ko amar Hashem, Hashem barishon ba'achad l'chodesh tikach ben par ben bakar tamim v'chiteta et hamikdash. On the first of the month, you shall take a bull of the herd without blemish, and you shall cleanse the sanctuary. So Yechezkel is dealing with both, right, this idea of the Rosh Chodesh Nisan and of preparing for Pesach. And what does it tell us? It tells us V'hishtachavu am haaretz, the common person, should come and worship. Petach hashar hahu b'shabbatot v'chadashim lifnei Hashem. That they come on Shabbat and the new moons at the entrance of the same gate, right? So yeah, please.
It's
blacked out.
It's blacked out. We can't see the print. It's
oh my gosh! Thank you for letting me know that. Okay, hold on. Let me try again. Oh, well, I hope my reading was helpful. It's hard. I've noticed this when reading to my children that like it's a different skill to listen and to follow along. So I apologize for that. Let's try again. This is the way I normally do it. I detached it from the, you see it now? Oh, it says my screen share is loading. Oh, now it says I'm sharing. Can you see?
no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, now we can, yes.
Oh, great. Okay, that's so weird. Okay, so this was the boring part in my mind anyway. I felt obliged to connect the Parsha to the Haftarah. Right, this is just to say that Nisan marks the beginning of the new year for the Regalim, and that Yechezkel mentions this idea of our counting the first day of the first month and preparing to go and offer our Korban Pesach, and that there were several times a year when people would come to the same entrance to the same gate, and everyone was allowed to come in together. So on to the more exciting part. So what I called crowd control in the Haftarah. So you can see a few psukim later. It says, Bevo am haaretz lifnei Hashem b'moadim. So moadim are separate from Shabbatot uv'chadashim, right? Rosh Chodesh and Shabbat, you go to one gate. But on fixed occasions, on the times of the moadim, haba derech sha'ar tzifon. The people would come before God, entering through the north gate, Lishtachavot, Yetzei derech sha'ar Negev, and they would bow low, and then they would leave by the south gate. Yetzei derech sha'ar by the south gate, right? And whoever enters in the south gate, Yetzei derech sha'ar tzafona, lo yashuv derech hasha'ar asher bo ki nichicho yetzei, right? Whoever leaves by the south gate enters by the south gate should leave by the north gate. You don't go back in the way you came, but you go out the opposite one. So it's a little bit hard to understand what's happening here, right? It seems like there's some kind of crowd control going on here, that there's only one direction. So once you enter, you have to keep going. It's sort of like a ride at Disney World, right? You can't get off until you get to the end. But it's curious that there are two different directions for how to go, right? Some people seem to go in the north and out the south, and other people seem to go out the south and in the north. And so I want to look at both this idea of sort of one directionality and why there is a possibility for people to be at cross ends, right? You would think that once you're allowing people to go in both directions, what would the harm be in allowing people to turn around and go out the other way? So the first, I want to look at three texts. The first one is, I think, sort of an interesting application in a halacha, where Rabbi Abahu is there talking about a series of cases where you can and can't walk. And Rabbi Abahu says, Im haya shvil me'ikaro mutar. If it was originally a path that passed through the site where the shul was erected, one is permitted to pass through, right? So they're talking about whether you can use the shul as like a cut through, right? If you're trying to get from East Prairie to the other street behind the shul that I don't know the name of. My husband is laughing. This is a poor example, right? You can't run through the front door and out the back door to get across the street instead of going sort of around the corner, like where that tent is. Or perhaps even if you're in the coat closet area and you want to get to the social hall, you can't just run through the shul. You should come through the hallway, past the front of the shul, and to the other side. And Rabbi Chalbo says that Rabbi Huda says, "Hanichnas lebeit hakneset lihitpalel mutar la'asoto kapanderia." Right, that if you've already gone to daven, then you can make a shortcut. So if you've gone into the coat room and then you decide to daven for a while, and then you decide you want coffee with the coffee clutch, then you can sort of just walk through Of course, that's not practical when shul is running because the men and women's sides are separate, but the idea of sort of taking that shortcut is allowed. And that is enters into halacha, and it's brought from this idea that there is sort of one directionality and that you have to be intentional. It can't be a spot along the way, but that you are allowed to sort of move through the experience, just like Yechezkel mentions. Is that clear? It's like a pretty unusual shaila to get, right? Usually it's easy to just go around. But I did think it was interesting that I think it's rare that Yechezkel sort of enters the halachic stream of discourse. Then in the 929 website, which is a fantastic resource, 929 is a parak of Torah, Navi, a day. And I forget how long the cycle is. It's not terribly long, 2 years, maybe something like that. It's a beautiful website. And I believe that there's someone at the shul whose name is escaping me who does this Nach Yomi every day as part of 929, every Tuesday as part of 929. So I encourage you to join.
Dr. Myra Weiss.
Myra Weiss.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Myra Weiss at
Yeah,
3 p.m. I think is when it is. And there is if you go to the website, there are many short sort of essays that different people write. Molly Morris is a frequent contributor. And when I was looking at our parak in Yechezkel, I found this beautiful passage that she wrote. Perhaps there's another message in this exercise of physically entering the temple or our synagogues one way and leaving another. The doors we go through matter. We kiss our mezuzahs to elevate and remember the holiness of the places we enter. So too, we need to ensure that when we engage in prayer, be it in the Holy Temple or in our synagogues today, we leave differently than we arrived. Prayer is meant to change us. It's not meant to be a rote practice that we walk into, dispense with, and go back by the gate through which we came. Just as we leave through a different door, we should merit to leave with a different demeanor, an elevated spirituality, and a sense of community. So I thought that was a lovely intention to enter, right? If we're sort of emotionally rather than practically preparing for Pesach by reading the Maftir and the Haftarah, I thought this was a beautiful intention to bring from this pasuk in Yechezkel, which is that when we come into shul, we should leave in some different way, if not physically, emotionally, or spiritually, or socially, communally. That when we spend all that time sitting in shul, something should change within us. And so when Yechezkel says you have to go through a different door than when you come in, perhaps what he's saying is make this aliyat haregel, right? Make this formative, important experience count in some way. Let it change you. Let it alter the way you think about something. Go out a different door than you come in. So I think that's like the sort of modern approach to this. And I thought it was very beautiful. It spoke to me. But there was an a beautiful
Who wrote that piece?
Her name is Molly Morris, and she's I believe she's a social worker or a psychiatrist, psychologist. I don't remember her bio, but if you go to the 929 website, like if you put in Yechezkel chapter 46, you'll see that there are several different articles, and I've noticed through sort of scanning our Haftarot in 929 that she writes frequently, and she often writes very beautiful things. I think I brought her when we talked about Alicia and the woman with the empty jars of oil way back at the beginning of the year. She has like a very community focused approach, and it's often very, very moving. But the Mishnah Smachot, I think, was sort of onto this in a slightly different way, obviously many centuries before Mali. They talk about the traffic flow, and they ask that question that I asked. If once you're allowing people to go in and out different doors, why do they dafka have to leave a different door than they entered? And it seems like this is actually a highly choreographed direction. You don't get to select whether you enter through the south and exit through the north or vice versa. This has been decided for you. So the Mishnah opens by talking about what happens if you're in mourning on a day where you're supposed to go to the Beit HaMikdash. On the first and second days of mourning, sort of the most heightened days of mourning, you cannot go at all. It's just not appropriate. But after the third day, you can go, you can enter, but the text is clear, nichnas v'mekif b'derech simol, that you go around to the left, right? So everyone else is going to the right, and you're going to go to the left. And then it turns out that there are actually several categories of people that should go to the left, right? An avel, someone who is mourning. A minudeh, someone who's been excommunicated. Umi sheyesh lo chola b'toch beito, someone who has a sick person in the house. Umi she'avad lo aveda, and someone who has lost some kind of object. So people who are struggling in some way or another, right? Someone who has lost a person, a mourner, someone who has lost an object, like maybe you could imagine like financial strife, like, you know, foreclosure on your house, or you lost your engagement ring or your mother's, you know, jewelry. Someone who is a minudeh, right? Someone who has done something wrong. They've been excommunicated. Someone who has a sick person in their house, not necessarily that they are sick, right? I think the Mishnah assumes you can't go if you're sick, but something that is weighing you down in some way or another. And so what happens when those four classes of people go into the to do the aliyat regel? They go halach mekif al smol, aval shehu omer lo hashochem b'bayit hazeh. When the person asks, sorry, I lost my place here for a second. I'm trying to find where, right, someone will notice that you are going around the wrong way, right? And instead of sort of like looking the other way, or just rushing by, you're supposed to address the person. And you're supposed to say, why are you going in this direction? And then he says, oh, I'm a mourner. I am a minudeh, right? Someone is sick in my house. And you respond, you, the person who's going sort of in the correct direction, quote unquote. Oh, that's where I was. Right? Anyone who dwells in this house should come. May he who dwells in this house comfort you, right? Meaning God should comfort you. Because we're in the Beit HaMikdash, right? And if he says, oh, it's because I am a minudeh, it's, well, the person who dwells in this house should draw you close, right? Right? Meaning the person who is doing the thing in the opposite direction, you're supposed to offer them words of comfort. God will hopefully heal the person in your house. God will give you comfort if someone has died. God will bring you close if you are someone who has become excommunicated. Right, to someone who is a sick person, God should have mercy on the person, right? Right, and if he's barely living, if it would be a mercy to have let the person leave this world, right? That's what we offer. And so it seems to me, oh yeah, please, Tamar.
It looks like the leftward walking is meant to elicit comfort. It's meant to bring comfort to the person who has suffered the loss, whatever it is, from the other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's both. It's the first step is it's like meant to highlight, right? You know, I think often when we are struggling, we tend to stay home, right? Because it's uncomfortable to go to shul when you know everyone's looking at you. You know, I have a friend who lost someone in her family, and she said, oh, whenever someone comes over, they sort of do that like, oh, how are you doing? Like sad sort of head tilt, you know, and she's like so tired of it. She doesn't want to see anyone because it's, you know, she's tired of having that pity look. And I think that the first thing that this Mishnah is saying is you've got to go, right? Even if you don't feel like being with other people, even if it feels awkward, this is Aliyat Regel, right? This is Pesach coming. And so it's really important to show up anyway. And then I think you're 100% right, Tamar, right? Is that you have to be inquisitive about the people who are going the wrong direction, especially when you think about a minudeh, right? Someone who has done something to be excommunicated. You could imagine the like social stigma that is placed on that person. It would be so easy not to ask about them. And yet the Mishnah is telling us you have to ask, and not just ask, but what you're saying, Tamar, right? You have to offer them comfort. May God bring you back, right? May God comfort you. May God help your sick person by having mercy on them. I think the last one, right? What is it? When you've lost something, you should say Hashochem b'bayit hazeh yitem b'lev mi shematza v'yachzira lach, right? May God put it into the heart of the finder to return it to you at once, which I think is just an interesting beautiful thing. It's right. It's not may you get over the loss of that thing. It's may you get that thing back, and not just like by chance, but that God will actually help the person give it to you. And I think the story here is particularly interesting, right? That this particular person lost a scroll of the Torah, which he had bought for 100 mina. So it was expensive and it was holy, and he had lost it. And he goes up and he goes around and did not move from there until they came and told him the scroll of the Torah has been found. It seems like he elicited enough tefillot that God would put in the heart of the finder to return it, that it actually came true and he got it back. Which indicates some sort of like magic that I think I don't particularly want to ascribe to the conversation, but is an interesting way of framing this conversation. It's like, oh, it will really work, right? Maybe it won't work so obviously. I think that's like too much to hope for, but it will really work. You'll really feel comforted. You'll really feel seen by your community, right? You'll really feel included. And I think it's interesting that the way you feel included is by standing out. Right? Because if you just went the same way, people might not ask you. They might not even know to ask you, or they might be uncomfortable asking you, but you must stand out. And when you stand out, you'll be included once again in the community. And so I think that this comes from our description here in Yechezkel about people going in and out different gates and going in different directions. And so if we're thinking about preparing for Yontif, not just that we should opt to come in and out different gates, but that we should be on the lookout for people who look like they're going in the other direction, right? I think it takes a lot of bravery to come to shul when you're feeling sad, or you're feeling out like an outcast, or you're worrying about something that is lost to you. And so it's so important when there's not this beautiful tradition of going in the opposite direction to be able to look for people and to say, Malach, right? What's going on with you? Why have you gone in the other way? Why do you look sad, right? Why were you crying during davening? Whatever the thing is. And then to listen, and then to be able to offer some beautiful words to say, I hope it gets better. I hope that God finds what you lost, or helps cure the person who is sick, or provides comfort to you, brings you closer. They're such beautiful words. It's almost like giving you a menu of options for which to say to those that come to shul and look maybe a little lost, a little bit in the opposite direction. It's not nearly as discernible as it used to be, but I think that we can still find people who look like they're going sort of in the wrong direction if we try. And so I was inspired to bring that. I love this piece of smachot to bring it here, but I would love to hear others' thoughts, questions.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. Yasha Kochech, first of all. Second of all, what reminds me of something I probably will never forget, when I took my mother's Aron to Israel to be buried, and I'm coming back to the airport. I'm back at the airport, I think the same night or the next night, I don't remember, to finish off the shiva in Chicago. And because I had passport to the passport guy, of course, he's a holy Israeli, and my shirt was torn from tearing Kriya. And just the way he looked at me, and he said, Hashem yinachem otcha.
Beautiful.
Very nice.
Can you translate that?
And that God should offer comfort.
Comfort.
So it's sort of an abbreviated form of the Hamakom Yinachem Etzchem Betoch Sharei Avletzion V'Yerushalayim. So like a more casual maybe utterance of that.
No.
Several things come to mind. Number one, when a rabbi friend of ours mentioned that he was out of town during the Shiva for his father, whatever it was. And he said he found the synagogue, and he went in there for the Shabbat service or whatever it was coming up. And he came and went, and no one said a word to him, even though his beard was looking like he hadn't shaved in 30 days.
Yeah,
And
good tell.
he felt that was very unhospitable.
Hmm.
But I'm reminded of a drash, I guess, on that segment in the Torah that describes the treatment of the lepers. And will somebody remind me, the leper is supposed to go through the streets, all covered from head to toe. If he's walking through the streets, he's supposed to warn people. Do you remember the phrase that he has to say?
No.
Most readers react to that as being rather cruel,
Hmm.
telling people to stay away because he's a leper. And this particular take on it suggested that the reason for alerting passersby is to give them the opportunity of a mitzvah, to give him a blessing of the sort that we read here. And I wonder if it maybe was inspired by this very passage to do that. It certainly changed my whole attitude about people who randomly pass by and you can tell they're in trouble.
Hmm.
Just offering a blessing, so to speak, a word of comfort like that is better than nothing, and maybe a lot more than one supposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I spoke about Rabbi Sharon Brous when I had just come back. It was a Tuesday. I had just come back from seeing her speak. She wrote a book called The Amen Effect, which is about the power of community, right? Of coming into community, of being like sort of seen. Right. She talks about how when you say Kaddish, like the biggest mitzvah you could do as a listener is to loudly say Amen at the end, right? Affirming that you see that person in their pain, in their sadness, and you can answer their bracha in that way. And I think in that way, it's right. Sometimes it's like too hard to say what the thing is that's wrong with you, right? If someone says, oh, what's wrong? You look upset. You feel like you're just going to burst into tears, right? But to just say amen, right? Sort of like what you're saying, Judith, right? Just to like see them, to offer them some kind of little comfort is beautiful. And I think it's often surprising how many people say, oh, well, someone's sick in my house. I'm really worried. My dad isn't doing well, right? Or, I lost a parent last Pesach and I'm still really struggling this Pesach, right? I think a lot of emotions come up over the regalim, and the Yamim Noraim. And so, right, sometimes we think someone's sort of gotten over something. And then it turns out that when you ask them, it's like still very, very current in their minds. And you're right, to offer just even a small, God should find comfort for you can be enormously comforting. Just to be seen, I think it's true.
Mm. I remember a passage that I read. Rabbi Akiva has a story that he was looking for somebody, a boy that didn't know his father had died until he finds, and then he tells in the town, where is this boy? I have to find him because his father died and he needs somebody to say Yehei Shema Rabbah to him. He didn't say the Kaddish. He used the Yehei Shem, the response to Kaddish. So the response is what was needed.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I remember when my father died and I was saying Kaddish during the year, there was one man, I wore Torah. Sometimes I used to go to Torah for the early meeting. And he was always make sure that he would stay next to me during davening. And when the Kaddish, he would say Amen and Shmei Rabbah directly to me. I could tell that he was close to me. He felt extremely comfortable and warm. It was a very comforting thing. So it was along those lines.
That's wonderful.
Not only does it comfort the mourner, but the Gemara and Daf Gimel and Brachot, because the great Tosfos over there says that the one thing that brings Hashem comfort, it was Mikales et Hashem, is the saying of Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah. That brings
Yeah.
Hashem comfort after he forced the Jews into exile and destroyed the Beit HaMikdash and so on.
And how powerful to think about the idea of either seeing in some way the Shekhinah going left, right? See God upset, right? Brachot loves to talk about like, how would God daven if God davened, right? To sort of imagine God, how we echo the divine in prayer. But to see, right? I think this year it feels especially pertinent, sort of like that, right? How must God feel having seen so much destruction and so much despair over the last few months, right? How reassuring would it be for God to hear those loud amens, those loud Yehi Shmei Rabbahs? I think that really resonates for me today, thinking about that. And, I think even thinking about that, right? Like that's not one of the categories of the Mishnah is like being worried about world affairs, right? But like, that's a pretty good reason to be upset these days. And in some ways, I think we would all be going left some yontifs, right? If we could. And so I think that's why the Mishnah has to sort of put some structure around it, right? There has to be some extra special reason to go left. But how much empathy can we bring thinking, oh, well, I kind of feel like I'm left circling myself these days, right? To have that empathy instead of just sympathy for those who actively have to walk left. Well, I hope that
one more quick point.
Sure, please.
Those people who fetch and complain, and they base it on certain rabbis, about why Yom HaShoah is not necessary, and it should all be included in Tisha B'Av, and so on and so forth. And I always say, what is so terrible when hundreds of Jews get together in synagogues all over the world and Modomnim and everywhere else, and at the very least are answering Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah once in the year in mass for those that were killed in the Holocaust. I mean, I always tell people that. I said, listen, people are saying Kaddish. That's a good thing.
And look, I think you're hitting upon something about the regalim also, right? It's like, it's powerful when a whole bunch of people get together in one space. And so we know that lots of people came on Rosh Chodesh and on Shabbat, but if you lived far away, the regalim might be the only time you came to the Beit HaMikdash. And so I think sort of similarly to what you're saying, right? This is a time where a whole bunch of people are gathered together to talk to each other. And so to offer those condolences and to answer those big amens is especially powerful in a big group. I think that I 100% agree. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the power of lots of people asking, right? Imagine like the train system, after a big baseball game or after a rally where like, everyone's packed together. Think about how many times the left circling guy gets asked the same question. And every time he has to say, oh, I'm an Avel. And the person has to say, oh, Hashochem b'bayit hazeh should, merachem alav. I think it's probably tedious and also powerful in its volume to get that so many times, right? It's not like the Friday night when you walk into shul, although there are similarities, when you're in Avelut and everyone turns and says the hamakom to you, right? That is like an acknowledgement. Oh, hey, this person's coming in a different direction than us. But here, I think it's like, it's constant, right? Oh, why are you going that way? Why are you going that way? And you have to keep saying it over and over. And I think sometimes it's hard to share things. I was telling my daughter this Mishnah and asking what she thought about it. And I said, I'm someone who doesn't like to share. I think I would want to come to shul and just go right with everyone else. But it's good for you to sometimes practice, being more open in your own community and the safe space that is the Beit HaMikdash, that is the shul, that is your community. And it sort of forces you to practice sharing out loud. And I think that's a beautiful thing too. So I think I love the power of this because it speaks both to the person going left and to the person going right. Right? You have to come and you have to tell people what's wrong and know that you'll get these beautiful responses in return. And then to the person going, right, you have to see that there are people in your community that aren't all right, and you have to offer them these beautiful words of comfort. And so, right, it goes beyond the meal train and beyond the showing up at Kaddish minions. This is later, right? This is not an action, but just an offering of words and of love and expression of love at a hard time. So I wish for everyone that no matter what direction you go on Pesach, that you find your partner at shul, whether you're on the lookout to be seen or to see someone else, and that you should have a meaningful Pesach, knowing that you're going to come in a different door than you go out. I will see you before Pesach, but this is our last preparation for Pesach in the Haftarah. I hope it's a good one.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
It's
Oh, my
beautiful.
pleasure. Glad you could be here.
Yasher kochech, yasher kochechem.
Thank you. Thursday, Rav Hodi is teaching in person in the rabbinic suite on Yosef and Chametz, a little bit more of a drashy preparation for your Seder. Next Tuesday, I will be teaching Haftarah, and then next Thursday, I will teach on Zoom at 8 p.m. About Yachat and breaking things as a Seder opener, and the power of breaking and mending. So I hope to see you at one or all of those things, and I wish you a Shabbat Shalom this week.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. You know, I didn't realize Rav Hodi was this
Thank
week.
you, thank you.
My pleasure. What did you say, Melissa?
I didn't even realize that the Thursday Rav Hodi one was this Thursday. So thank you for that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Pesach is coming. We decided not to do anything the week of Pesach, basically, because we found that it's a hard night, 3 days before Pesach to come to shul or even on Zoom. So we did it the first three, so
That's great.
but you
Thanks,
should definitely
thanks
go.
so much. I'm going to try to make it.
Cool. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.